Let's get this out of the way very quickly. This video is not sponsored by Skillshare. I did have one Skillshare sponsorship in the class, but I guess they weren't overly pleased with it because I never heard from them again. Odds are good that this video might disqualify me from ever representing them again, but we'll see. If you've seen my stuff before, you know I kind of despise Instapoetry, and we'll talk about why soon enough. And yet I remember taking this class when I did that Skillshare sponsor and thinking there was more to it than I'd initially thought. So why don't we just get into it and see if I'm wearing rose-colored glasses.
Writing has always been a part of me. I write because writing is the best way I know how to process my life. Hi, my name is Alison Malee. I am a writer, poet, and performer, and I'm going to be teaching you a class today about how to begin writing poetry.
Right, so this is Alison Malee, and I want to make this very clear, I'm not trying to pick on Alison. I've seen some of her poems, I think she's got some good stuff, I think a lot of it could be better, but ultimately she's just getting that bag by doing this Skillshare class. She's not a millionaire like Rupi Kaur, she's just another poetry lover, and ultimately I think her goal for this class is a good one, and it's a goal I share, teaching and encouraging people to write poetry. Alison also says,
We are breaking down poetry writing into bite-sized steps. We are narrowing the lens from maybe the broad and intimidating view of a poem to something that is very tangible and specific.
And again, this is a goal I very much agree with. A lot of people see poetry as extremely intimidating, both in reading and writing, so narrowing it down is a great idea. I've even said before that for all of Instapoetry's faults, it's genuinely a good gateway to poetry in general. But later in Lesson 1, Alison describes Instapoetry as such.
And recently, poets have found a way to share their work online that is bite-sized and digestible and gives the readers a glimpse into their work.
So in theory, there's nothing wrong with a poem that's bite-sized. There's also nothing necessarily wrong with a poem that's digestible. So what's my problem with Instapoetry? Well, let's compare and contrast for a moment. Here's one of Basho's haikus. In Kyoto, hearing the cuckoo, I long for Kyoto. This is a bite-sized poem, and on its face, it does look very simple, but the more you read into it, the more you find. What I think is obviously most striking is that the speaker makes it sound like they're in Kyoto, but also that they're longing for Kyoto. What a strange reveal. How can you long for something you already have? It makes a reader question whether the first line and third line take place in different times, which would be a unique way to format a haiku. On the other hand, the haiku might all take place at one time, but the speaker longs for a Kyoto they remember rather than the one they're currently in. And this is all disregarding the second line, hearing the cuckoo. Does that sound perhaps trigger a memory for the speaker, or are the first two lines of this poem a memory themselves? What's so masterful about a poem like this is that it gives you so much to think about despite its size. The translation I've shown here is by Jane Hirschfield. Don Wentworth from Lilliput Review also showcased this translation from Robert Hass, writing, Even in Kyoto, hearing the cuckoo's cry, I long for Kyoto. I love this haiku. It has a certain postmodern quality that gives it a great contemporary appeal, yet describes a very essential truism about the nature of life. This is a poem about memory and nostalgia, and probably more importantly, it addresses the second of the Four Noble Truths. The origin of suffering is attachment. What is felt here is the sweetness, the very humanness of the pain caused by attachment. The meaning certainly comes through a little clearer in Haas's translation, but I still like the ambiguousness of Hirschfield's too. I won't say either translation is better, but I really like the way Hirschfield's doesn't quite place us, despite the poem starting with the word in. There's a fun irony in that sense of dislocation. Now let's look at this poem highlighted in the Skillshare class. I don't think Alison chose this poem, more likely it was someone at Skillshare, but regardless, this is a piece by R.M. Drake. You will always have at least one person who cares for you, one person who thinks of you before they go to bed, and one who gets up in the morning at the very thought of you. In all fairness, this is far from the worst Insta poem I've ever seen, but at the same time, there's just not much to it. At most, this poem probably reminds you of someone you know in real life. But unlike Basho's poem, it just doesn't give much to think about. You read it once, you get the gist, you move on. Once the poem is over, there's not much to linger on. It commits one of the worst sins a poem can. It's forgettable. A lot of Insta poems just read like platitudes, things you tell yourself in any given moment. Basho's poem doesn't read like a platitude to me at all. But we've strayed pretty far from the topic at hand. Alison Malee also mentioned that Instapoetry is an opportunity for readers to get a taste of your work. I don't disagree with that. I think there are some poets who actually make good use of Instagram while still delivering meaningful poems. But oftentimes the taste I get from Insta poems is rather lackluster. Alison goes on to say,
"The poetry that is shared online is often very personal, open, and honest. Because of this, it is easily relatable and resonates with a really wide audience."
And I think I've said this before in my videos, but oftentimes creating a poem that's meant to have broad appeal actually leaves it with much less of an impact. For me, I think it's in specifics where poems really take off. For example, in this poem by Alison, The Bra. You know the one. Shuffled from bag to drawer to carry on, felt by different hands, seen by different eyes, burnt by the flat iron, settles over your chest like a prophecy. Remember when Ashley tried to steal it that night, after the dancing, after the moon had tucked itself into the sky's violet pocket, with sweat still pooled in the lining? Just makes the girls pop, she said. Thick straps paired with sturdy catches. After so many years, and for most of them, the only consistency. Now, I'm not going to say this poem is without its flaws, but it flourishes in the specific details. I rather like its progression from more general to more specific, even though I do kind of wish we had more specifics about the travels or the different hands, maybe. I love the anecdote about Ashley and how tactile the phrase, with sweat still pooled in the lining, is. That phrase is even a bit visceral. Using a bra as a symbol seems kind of silly, and in certain ways it absolutely does come off as silly in the poem, but it also communicates a very human experience, not to mention an insecurity. While the poem's conclusion is delivered rather plainly, it feels earned given the journey on which the poem has taken us. It's much more engaging than this poem shown by Wilder, and I learned that even flowers can be beautiful when it's dark. Listen, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, and I don't know if this poem is part of a larger whole, and I'm sorry to nitpick, but what do you mean even flowers can be beautiful when it's dark? Flowers are already beautiful. Wouldn't you want something seen as conventionally ugly to make this phrase make sense? Or wouldn't you want to write it as flowers can be beautiful even when it's dark? I'm sorry, I don't want to get riled up over this. This is beside the point. In the next lesson, Alison starts prompting the viewer, and I actually like her approach to her chosen prompt, which is, what did you do for the first time this year? I think it's a fine prompt, but I like how Alison tells us to consider some of the smaller firsts rather than some of the more grand ones. I talked about this in my recent video on love poems, but I love poetry that takes the mundane and makes it feel grand. Alison encourages us to go even deeper, to not just write a poem about whatever our first is, but to take a specific moment from that first. I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of a boring section of the Skillshare class. Not boring as a learner, but boring as content for a video. Alison is actually being a good teacher, guiding a beginner through the writing of a poem with her own personal example.
Out of my entire list of firsts, the one that I landed on was meeting my daughter Rylan for the first time. And when I looked into it a little bit further, the moment that I wanted to expand upon is holding her for the first time. Obviously, this is a very chaotic, hectic moment that I'm going to try and describe further, but it was certainly the most life-changing and the most important thing that happened to me in this past year.
Granted, Alison is sort of going against her own advice of homing in on some of the smaller firsts that we might take for granted, but I really won't hold that against her too much. What writing parent wouldn't want to write a poem about holding their baby in their arms? But considering how so many people have that same experience, it'll be in the specific details where this poem takes off. Alison knows this just as well and starts homing in on imagery, which I think is fantastic. She instructs us to just write a list about everything we can remember, to have as much material to pull from as possible. She writes a paragraph detailing things further, and from this, she will distill the poem. I think this is a fine approach, especially for a beginner poet who might feel daunted about starting a poem at all.
The main objective of poetic language is to show your reader versus telling them. Using plain language, you might say, "What color is the sky?" Your answer to that is probably, "The sky is blue." But in poetic language, you might ask yourself, "How can I describe the color of the sky without naming it?"
Now, first, let me say, I agree with this. But weirdly, another Skillshare poetry class uses almost this exact wording.
Direct language may look up and correctly describe the sky as blue. Poetic language, on the other hand, will look up and describe for you all the things the blue reminds it of, like a baby's blanket, or a flavor of ice cream, or a pair of well-worn beloved shoes.
This, among other factors, makes me wonder to what extent Skillshare wrote these classes, you know? Granted, it's completely within the realm of possibility that both poets would use the same concept to describe poetic language. But anyway, I'd really love to home in on Alison saying that the main objective of poetic language is to show versus tell. A lot of writers might disagree with this, but I'm a big proponent of show versus tell. The main problem with Instapoems, the reason that they're often so boring and aren't thought-provoking, is because they're all tell and no show. For example, there's this Rupi Kaur poem showcased in the Skillshare class. You are the person I look up to most when I am about to shatter. I think of your strength and harden. I think you are a magician. I want to fill the rest of your life with ease. You are the hero of heroes, the god of gods. Again, I want to admit this is not the worst Instapoem I've ever seen, and certainly not Kaur's worst, but without the context of the post it came from, would you know this is a poem about mothers? Potentially, but in its current state it could very well be a poem about any aspirational figure. And in fairness to Kaur, she did say in the post that the poem was for moms, mother figures, caretakers, raisers, and warriors who helped make us who we are today. And honestly, that makes the use of God rather than goddess quite interesting to me. But again, I feel it's too broad to actually be about mothers, let alone the speaker's mother. A much more powerful poem would have stemmed from a moment or memory wherein we see how heroic the mother truly is. Then the shift to I want to fill the rest of your life with ease would have been that much more satisfying, in my opinion. So where did Alison land with her poem? This is what she wrote. Fresh, sweet eyes blink into soft focus and startle at the waiting light and open faces. There is such stillness as the world outside pauses, wraps itself around this quiet moment. Like a frail little bird, she folds herself into my chest, presses her cheek into my skin until we are both spreading our wings and sailing. It is an eruption and then chaos. Chaos and then a settling peace. I hook my finger through the small length of her palm, let the tears fall, welcome her home. I honestly don't think this is so bad. I think maybe the third stanza should have come right after the first stanza, and I think the bird metaphor maybe could have used a little tweaking. Also, to say the world pauses is kind of a cliche. And if I had to nitpick, I think the word pauses could have been at the end of the third line rather than the start of the fourth, really emphasizing the pause, painting with the language there. What's more, maybe there are some words that could be swapped out for some stronger, more unique ones, but for the most part, I think this is a decent snapshot of exactly what Malee was trying to capture. The next two lessons tell us to extract a line from our poem and use it to create an aesthetic vignette. As such, the class is partially focused on visuals, which I think is good. Part of the appeal of Instagram, and Instapoetry for that matter, is the aesthetic after all. But ultimately, I couldn't complete this video without following Alison's steps in writing a poem. First, I made a list of all the things I did for the first time over the past 12 months. I honestly had a hard time thinking of anything, but then I remembered I took a trip to Washington, D.C., so I wrote down 5 new things that I did there. 1. Saw the Library of Congress. 2. Went to Folger's Shakespeare Library. 3. Had Turkish food for the first time. 4. Saw the Washington Monument. 5. Saw the Lincoln Memorial. And those are just 5 things picked mostly at random. Of those 5 things, the Library of Congress probably had the biggest effect on me. It's hard to pick just one moment from my visit to the library. There were a lot of great visuals and pieces of information, but I think what stood out to me the most were a couple of statues in the Great Hall shown to me on a guided tour. So from here, I described the moment in plain language, recounting the setting, what I heard, what I saw, and what I felt. I was at the Library of Congress, a historic building with high ceilings, white marble pillars, gold flourishes, paintings, relics, and stone carvings. I heard a lot of low chatter. I seemed to remember a great deal of echoing. I also heard plenty of footsteps, along with the voice of my tour guide. I saw 2 sculptures on opposite sides of each other. One statue showed the eastern half of the globe with a European baby on one side and an East Asian baby on the other side, each of their hands on the globe. The opposite sculpture featured the western half of the globe with an African baby and a Native American baby on either side. But while the African baby had his hand on the globe, the indigenous American baby had his hand just above his eyes. The tour guide said the sculptor never made a statement on why this hand was excluded from the globe. I thought about my mom's stepdad, a native man from the Yurok tribe in California. I had to wonder how he would have felt about this. I felt angry myself. I felt there was really only one way to interpret the exclusion. A means of saying native peoples no longer had any claim to a land of their own. And if that was the artist's intention, was it condemnatory? Somehow I didn't think so. But then why include a native baby at all? It just made me feel kind of sick. Whew, sorry, didn't mean for this to get so personal or political for that matter, but I guess that's where some of the best poetry comes from, isn't it? Now I'll take my paragraph and write a poem with it, also including a simile, metaphor, and personification. And keep in mind, this is a rough draft. On a guided tour of the Library of Congress, looking at the statues of cherubs beside the globe, history wraps around me like the dough of flatbread. White marble pillars stretch and impose. Gold flourishes bend and point to the relics held within the library. Stone carvings conglomerate as a bowl of chili for the eyes. The tour guide points up above one staircase. There, a Mongolian baby with flowing silk and a dragon porcelain jar. Counterpart, a European baby with a lyre, book, and column, music, literature, and architecture. Between them, the globe, the world, rests under their high reaches, hands atop the North Pole. Opposite, an African baby with a club and the teeth of wild beasts around his neck. He reaches too. Other side, a native baby with a high feather headdress, a bow and arrow, and a necklace of quahog shells. However, he does not reach. Instead, he shields his eyes from the sun blaring off of white colonizers, men like me. My stomach contracts, but he sees past them too and catches a glimpse of the future of a Yurok man, strong enough to preserve himself through boarding school, brave enough to take on children and grandchildren not his own, concerned enough to pass down stories of foxes, rabbits, eagles, and turkeys, caring enough to make his famous spaghetti sauce week in and week out, powerful enough to say, "I am still here." So, full disclosure, this is actually the second draft of this poem. It went through a round of revisions after I showed it to one of my weekly writing groups. I'll show you the first draft on screen and you can read the changes for yourself if you'd like. You can say it's not my place to write this poem, and that's completely fair. I would totally understand. I'm pretty bad at judging my own work, so let me know what you think. Was Alison's exercise worth it? Do I have something here with this piece, even if it's only the basis of something? Regardless of the quality of my poem, do I think this Skillshare class was worth it? Not really. Like, I suppose as a beginner's guide to writing a poem, it's alright. But the thing is, you probably don't need Skillshare of all places for this. I think there are a lot of free resources at your disposal if you want to get into poetry. Most importantly, libraries. There are free books available to all of us right now about how to write poetry. What's more, I think the most important steps in becoming a good poet are, first, read a lot of poetry, and second, write a lot of poetry. You don't need Skillshare or any other paid platform to do that. If this were a class about finding success as an Instapoet, then sure, that would be great. I was at a writers' conference recently, and almost all of the writers there emphasized how important an online following was. The problem is, there's really no way to guarantee success on any social platform. I feel so lucky every day to have a following of any kind. Another issue, though, is the fact that poetry is broadly pretty unpopular. Even Instapoetry, while it kind of had a pretty big moment, is going out of vogue, I feel. When you search for poetry on Skillshare, there are actually a surprising number of classes that pop up. But how many views do these classes have? I'm sure you could guess. The numbers just speak to the fact that poetry isn't the most popular artistic medium, even among people who like to write. Still, the fact that there are poetry classes on Skillshare? Awesome. There are even some specialized classes like haiku and erasure poetry, topics that absolutely deserve their own classes. I did an erasure workshop about a year and a half ago, and it was amazing. But if you want to use Skillshare for poetry specifically, I think you honestly have resources at your disposal that could accomplish the same thing. Now, is there a time when you should pay for poetry instruction? I think maybe. I mean, I'm in an MFA program right now learning how to write better poetry. But again, Skillshare I don't think is necessarily the place to put your money if you want to get better at poetry. But let me know what you think. Is Alison's class something you'd want to try? Have you ever taken online poetry classes? What was your experience like? Please tell me everything. And hey, before you go, take a look at this poem. This is a piece by one of my patrons, Misha Ray Santos. It reads, Catholic Knees. There is a wailing stuck in my throat, a cry with your name signed in red, rattling off my tongue in rivulets. There is hollow where the night used to be, painted gray over fluorescent lights, my conscience dipped in guilt, my Catholic knees fall like magnets to a metal floor, scraped and bruised on my pilgrimage to you. My final act of love, surrender hand on my beating chest, I beg of you, Swallow these aches as a part of me, apart from me, I beat them blue. Your final act of love, forgiveness. Heart on the line, you see me through bear the pain, like your own 2 feet. Doctor me clean, you make me new. For the chance to submit your poems for the end of my videos, or if you just like the channel and want to support, you can donate to the Patreon too. For just $3 a month, you can see videos early and get access to the community Discord. You're seeing my patrons' names on screen right now, and I genuinely can't thank them enough for their support. You guys are the reason I can do this. If you want to support in non-monetary ways, doing all the algorithm things really helps. Liking, commenting, subscribing, hyping, kissing gargoyles, all that jazz. It does help a lot, genuinely. You can also follow me on my socials if you want, but no matter what, keep reading, keep writing, and ultimately keep in mind, this is a rough draft. And for sticking around till the end, have a writing prompt. Today I want you to choose one of these not-so-good Insta poems showcased in this video. You have R.M. Drake's piece, Wilder's, or Rupi Kaur's. For this prompt, you have a few options. You can attempt to rewrite the poem, you can write a poem in response to the one you've selected, or you can take one of the lines or phrases from one of these poems and make it the title of your own piece. Or if you're not really feeling this prompt, you can do what Alison suggested in her Skillshare class. So now it's your turn. Get to writing.